Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of Baroni Remember. My name is Zenith.
And I'm Onyx.
And today we are diving into episode 4 of season 1, Applebuck season. Written by Amy Keating Rogers and first aired November 5th in 2010. Man, I still can't believe it's been, 13 years at this point?
Yep, 13 years.
Been quite a ride. Now, Applebuck season is actually the first episode that doesn't focus on Twilight. We actually get to focus on another character, Applejack, who is sort of the stereotypical Southern girl, and a lot of early fans of the show sort of criticized having such a character. But I think that she really just rounded out the gang, so to speak. Her character is not difficult to figure out, unlike some of the other main characters in the show. And we really get to see that here, where her motivations, her goals, her just whole persona is already pretty well fleshed out and pretty easy to figure out. And I actually like that in a character, where they're not really a mystery. You know, they're pretty straightforward. And I think that's a good thing to have.
It definitely is. It's always fun to have redneck farm characters.
Certainly, the chance for shenanigans increasing exponentially for each one you have.
Yes, it does, especially when you get a pit like city folk against country folk. It's pretty funny.
So in this episode, we have Applejack essentially going through the harvesting season at Sweet Apple Acres. And they call it Applebuck season. And right away, we see her and her brother, Big Macintosh, looking over the orchard, a very hilly orchard, I might add. And they're talking about trying to harvest all of the apples that are all ripe and ready to go. Except Big Macintosh is wrapped up in all kinds of bandages. Clearly, he's been hurt. We never find out how or why, but he's unable to help. So
yeah, it's never good having an injured partner when it comes to farming, because that just makes it a lot more difficult.
Correct. We don't want to
Applejack
make
definitely
worse.
Needs to hire some help, I think.
Well, as we find out, AJ is very insistent that this not take place. AJ is a very prideful to a stubborn degree, and this kind of gets in the way a lot.
Most farmers tend to be that way.
Yes, they do. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but here we see how such a character trait can become more of a flaw, because her insistence on taking care of Applebuck season all by herself leads her to wear herself out throughout the week, as she's promised to help out some of the other main characters with some of their tasks.
Yeah, that's not very typical of a farmer. Usually they're like, I can't do anything this week because I got to get the harvest in. I will definitely help out next week.
Yeah, AJ definitely spreads herself a little too thin this time, and it's not the only time she does it, but it's part of what makes her character great.
Especially when you don't have your family members to help out, or hired help if she would have it, but of course she doesn't.
No, because we find out fairly soon that most of the characters we saw in the original episode that were all there in Ponyville, most of them don't actually live there. They live all over Equestria, so they can't help her in Ponyville.
Yeah, that's a little sad when your family is a little too spread out to come together and help out.
As somebody who lives quite a fair distance from his own family, I understand the sentiment.
Oh, yeah.
So, the first thing that AJ does in this episode is she manages to save Ponyville from a stampede of cows, which, for some reason, all sound like they're from Minnesota.
Which is hilarious.
I don't know who thought that up, but it is hilarious.
Yes, the stereotypical Minnesotan accent is hilarious. Having lived in Minnesota, I can tell you it's pretty funny to listen to people talk like in that accent all the time.
It's pretty great. So AJ keeps all these cows from running over Ponyville, and Mayor, whom we haven't really seen yet, and kind of quickly becomes irrelevant after the season.
She had a few lines in the first episode, but that was about it.
That was really about it. Like, she kind of pops up here and there throughout the rest of the series, but very much has diminishing importance as time goes on. But she decides to grant AJ a trophy for saving the town. And it's at this point that we learn that AJ has already promised her help to several of the other ponies. She's going to help Pinkie Pie run Sugar Cube Corner. She's going to help Fluttershy herd up all these brand new baby bunnies and get them all counted. And it's going to lead to disaster, because the more and time goes on within the episode, the more and more tired AJ gets. And Twilight seems to be the only one who notices at first.
And is worried about her. Yeah.
Like, actually takes concern, like immediately offers to go help. And every time she gets
denied.
She gets denied. She gets rebuffed by AJ, because AJ is just of the mindset.
Too stubborn.
Very stubborn. You know, I have to do this alone. I promise to do this alone. This is my job. I don't need any help. I can take care of it. And so what ends up happening...
it's like it's almost like she made a bet that she could do it, and it just seems silly that she would say that I can do it all by myself.
She definitely made a bet against herself, and the
Lost.
results, the results are as predictable as they are hilarious, because when she goes to help Pinkie Pie, they wind up making some muffins, which it is during this scene...
And those muffins are great.
It is during the scene that we hear a background character sort of draw out the word muffins in anticipation. And I think this is the sort of fandom birth of Derpy.
Yeah, I can see that. Though I didn't think we really saw Derpy until season later.
She's a pretty prominent recurring background character in the first season, even up to this point. She's in a lot of the background shots. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, that's true, but I was thinking, like, actual speaking lines. It wasn't until later.
No, she didn't really get any speaking lines until season 2, and, well, what happened
even then,
with
it was just, like, briefly.
Well, there's a whole thing that happened with that episode, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
Yeah.
For those of you who aren't familiar, Derpy is a Pegasus mare, kind of gray fur, like straw blonde mane and tail, a series of bubbles and a cutie mark, kind of seen as rather ditzy and kind of carefree, wall-eyed, sort of the distinctive look with her. And at a certain point shortly after here, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the early days, is because there's so many little things that the fandom latches onto. And the writers actually take notice of this, to the point where this character that was just in all the background shots suddenly
they start making them more prevalent, giving them lines and stuff.
Well, and in the case of Derpy specifically, it becomes like a Where's Waldo?
Yes. I definitely agree that. Definitely a Where's Waldo moment. I was like, oh, there's Derpy.
She appears in a snow globe in one episode. She appears like in just the most random places. It was like a scavenger hunt. Like, okay, where's Derpy in this new episode? And it culminated in a season 2 episode. But again, we'll get to that later, because there's a lot to talk about with that one.
I just love seeing these scenes where you get like the same background pony appearing in the same shot, especially during the scene where AJ's being given the trophy. Twilight's reading off of her hundreds of note cards, and there's like 2 bonbons in the crowd.
The changeling invasion had long begun.
Oh, yes.
Changelings are a whole nother thing, though. We'll keep that in our back pocket for later. They're fun. But yeah, because they didn't have a whole lot of rigs to use, you did wind up with essentially like copy pasted characters and big crowd shots to sort of fill it out. it's not until later that we start seeing more and more unique characters pop up in the background. Which I think kind of helped fuel the sort of early days rush to give all of these characters personalities.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Something else about this episode in particular, just the amount of like memes and like fan favorite gifs that come from this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot. Like, I'm sure we've all seen the still image of Twilight looking stern and there's trees in the background. That came from this episode. If you've ever seen the gif of Applejack leaping off some tall tower
and smacking into the ground.
Yeah, that's also from this episode. And then immediately, her pulling herself off the dirt and her eyes going all crazy. Yeah, that's all from this episode. Just this one episode. So, in the end here, we wind up seeing Applejack catapulting Rainbow Dash off into the Golden Oaks Library. We wind up seeing Applejack essentially poisoning half the town.
Oh yes, that is something that's quite hilarious.
Yes, the muffins. Instead of making actual muffins, she starts putting in things like soda and potato chips and earthworms, all because she's too tired to hear Pinkie Pie clearly.
Well, she smacked her face into the ground a couple times.
Yeah, probably sporting at least one concussion.
I'd probably say 2 or 3.
Either way, it doesn't end well for anybody. We see
no, it doesn't.
We see another stampede, which leads to like a Lion King moment.
Yeah, that's quite funny, but with rabbits of all creatures.
Yeah, so AJ and Winona, her dog, are trying to round up all of these baby bunnies, and they get scared and they run off into town. And there's another background character, Lily, stuck in the middle of the road. As they approach, she faints, and they kind of sort of gently go around her down the road, very reminiscent of the what were
Lion King.
Yeah, the wildebeest.
Yeah, it was wildebeest that trampled Mufasa.
Yeah, very very reminiscent of that.
I was still laughing at all the flower related ponies freaking out over all their flowers being destroyed and eaten by the rabbits.
All the flowers devoured. Yes. I hope the writers got paid for overtime for some of these early episodes, because they really did do a good job.
Yes, they did.
But at the end of the day, AJ winds up acknowledging that she needs help. That she spread herself too thin, and that she did, in fact, make a promise that her legs couldn't keep.
Yeah. I definitely think it would help if she would hire a couple unicorn workers to just use their levitation and pluck all the trees off the apples off the trees. It'd make the harvesting a lot simpler.
Which is exactly what Twilight does.
Yes, I mean, Twilight does it, and it just means it's like, hey, Earth ponies may be good at taking care of everything, but when it comes to harvest season, especially apples, hire your unicorn friends. Take them, just pick all the apples. They'll get it done in a day, versus taking a week or so.
Yeah, well, we'll find out, I think, in this very season, just how well Earth ponies take to unicorn interference with their traditions.
Oh, yes.
That's another fan favorite episode.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yep, just magic makes everything simpler.
Magic does indeed make everything simpler, but I think you have to remember when to use it. Not just,
that is true.
Not just go about it willy-nilly, which is something we'll see actually very soon.
Yep, and It's definitely nice to see the characters realizing when they've messed up and saying sorry and moving on from there, learning that they need to ask for help every once in a while.
Admitting that you don't have the capabilities to hold up to something you said that you're going to do is not a flaw, it's a strength. And I think that's something that really gets sort of understated, especially nowadays. It's important to know what your limits are, and it's important to know that if you've got people you can rely on to help you, you don't be afraid to ask for help.
Right. I do like this little bit where Spike actually enjoys the muffins at the end.
Oh, God. Spike is just a living garbage disposal.
Yes.
That dragon will eat pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And, well, I think that about does it for this episode.
Yes, it does.
And hope y'all will tune in for episode number 5, Griffin the Brush Off. It's a fun one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.